All right, how does people pleasing or the nice guy syndrome show up in your life? Now, if you're here, I'm guessing you already know what the nice guy syndrome is or what people pleasing is, how it is a self-sabotaging behavior, and how that is not actually very nice for the people on the receiving end of your niceness. Now, in this video, I'm going to go over 4 primary ways that this shows up in your life, and for each part I'm going to give 4 examples. So I'm going to cover around 16 different examples of how this is showing up in your life, including 4 examples of how this shows up in relationships. So stick around until the end for that. Now, this is actually really important to learn about because even though you might already be identifying as a nice guy or a people pleaser, it's really important to just understand the broad spectrum of how this shows up, because some of them are really, really subtle. All right. Some you are unaware of, but they are the ones which are probably holding you back most. All right. How does this show up? Well, the first is a lack of boundaries. Okay. And this can look like you being overly accommodating for other people's needs, desires, expectations of you, whilst overexpending your energy and being drained by it. And this excessive care for others or meeting other people's expectations is coming because you feel like the only way you can get liked and loved and get your needs met is from self-sacrificing, meeting other people's needs. Okay, so you believe that you're only lovable when you're giving. And the trouble with this is that you're going to end up wearing yourself out. Okay, this lack of boundaries will just mean you're expending all your energy towards other people and you keep none for yourself. All right, the next example with a lack of boundaries is your inability to say no. This is coming from a fear of confrontation, a fear of upsetting people, disappointing people. But in doing that, again, you're just expending your energy and you're living a life on other people's terms, basically. This can also show up as feeling obliged to accept other people's invites, all right? And if you excessively just say yes, you'll end up always pleasing the other at the expense of following your own true desires, okay? And this leads to self-estrangement and just an immense lack of confidence. This also leads to you making commitments when you don't really feel it. All right. And at the worst end of the spectrum, this can lead to you always flaking on your friends. All right. And then you build this reputation of being unreliable or flaky. All right. So it's better just to put your stake in the ground and say, no, can't make that. I've got other priorities. Or thanks for the invitation, but hey, I want to spend some time alone this weekend. However it may be, it doesn't have to be abrasive or confrontational. So in not upholding boundaries and forever following other people's rhythms and desires, etc., you will lose confidence in yourself, all right? So this other way that people pleasing or the nice guy syndrome is showing up is a lack of confidence, all right? You constantly believe that you can never get what you want because you're not worthy of it, whether that's just plainly asking for it or just following your own path in life. Instead, you're kind of following what maybe society is telling you or your family is telling you. You can also tell you're lacking confidence when you hold back in approaching people, whether that's at work, asking people out, or asking for business opportunities. Other ways that a lack of self-confidence shows up is when you're constantly doubting your abilities or your talents or your gifts to the world, right? You constantly think of yourself as less than or not good enough. And lastly, you can tell you're lacking true confidence if you're afraid of expressing your true self, okay? You're constantly modulating. Now that brings us on to the second way that nice guy syndrome shows up in your life, and that is classic people pleasing or seeking approval, okay? Seeking external validation. Okay, the first way you will seek approval is by being agreeable, okay? You're constantly being a yes man. This makes you easily persuaded, all right? You don't want to go against the grain or rock the boat. All right, again, you're prioritizing other people's desires or plans over what is true for you, leading to that estrangement. And is also coming from this belief that being easygoing or passive is the best way to be. And it's going to be the best way to get liked and respected. But if you've been playing out this behavior pattern long enough, you'll see that that approach to life doesn't work. It will just leave you feeling estranged and resentful. All right, the other big way that you seek external validation, you seek approval, is through being dishonest. Okay, this is pure manipulation. And this shows up by you wearing masks. It's often called chameleoning. Okay, so like a chameleon changes its camouflage according to the background, according to the social situation or the person or how they're feeling. You're going to change your mood, all right, the tone of your voice, also maybe what you agree with, your political opinion, your taste in music can also show up in like how you're dressing. And suddenly you realize like, whoa, I'm, 5 different people with 5 friends of mine, or in these 5 different social interactions. And for sure, we've all got this to a degree. We all show up differently at the family dinner table, to how we show up with our best mate, to how we show up with our partner. But with people pleasers and nice guys, it's excessive. And even people might clock onto it when they see you in different situations, and they're like, okay, that's a bit weird. It's not really the Fred I know. That seems a bit inauthentic. And this is basically rooted in your fear of people finding out the true you. And this stems from internalized toxic shame, which is like the driving force behind all people-pleasing behavior. You are so afraid of people finding out the real you, and you believe that real version of you is not worthy of love, is not acceptable. Okay, this happens from your childhood conditioning, etc. So you're constantly trying to cover that up with masks, but this ultimately just leads you to being manipulative, inauthentic, and it is a poor attempt at trying to seek approval. All right, the next way that your seeking of approval shows up is being afraid of asking for what you want. You have this belief that it is somehow too much, or that it's rude behavior to just ask for what you want, all right? So therefore you hold back, and you'll miss a lot of opportunities in life, whether it's job opportunities, opportunities to travel, or dating opportunities, all because you are operating from this toxic shame of like, well, I'm not worthy to have my needs met, or hey, it's gonna be so uncomfortable for them to hear my authentic desires, and I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to make them uncomfortable, because that's going to reflect badly on me and trigger that toxic shame you're carrying. For me, this was very much conditioned by the culture I was brought up in the UK, where people are pretty reserved, and I learned that, hey, it's going to be rude or selfish to ask for what I want or what I need. Thankfully, moving to Germany, where people are actually a little bit different culturally, they're quite direct, it actually gave me a new space to learn a new behavior pattern. Okay, the next way your people pleasing shows up is through avoiding conflict. A very simple way is not being assertive, okay, and not having a backbone, particularly in situations where you need to negotiate or where you need to ask for what you want. Again, it's rooted in this fear of like, hey, people won't be able to handle me if I am assertive. This actually relates to the shadow, which are the unconscious parts of our personality, which we repress because for our conditioning, we believe they're bad, etc. Conflict avoiding can also show up as simply just avoiding situations which you believe are going to be triggering, or where you're going to have to confront people. So rather than going to have that necessary conversation with someone, whether a family member, colleague, your partner, you just simply avoid it and do all you can just to not go into that topic. So this is really rooted in nervous system regulation, okay? It's because you find any kind of challenging confrontational situation as really, really threatening, okay? From your childhood experiences, you haven't yet learned to have the capacity in your nervous system to handle that, to stay regulated. So instead you get overwhelmed. And when all these situations are too overwhelming, you just learn a pattern of just retreating and staying back, rather than having to face that discomfort, those uncomfortable sensations in your body. Sugarcoating, this is another way how your conflict avoidance shows up. And basically here, you're not being direct, You're not getting to the point. You're also being overly apologetic, perhaps in certain situations. You don't want anything to come across as abrasive or perhaps offensive. So a way to overcome this is just learn to be more concise, be more direct in your speech. And even if you've got an uncomfortable thing to say to someone, regulate yourself and just deliver it. And of course, don't be an asshole about it, but in your pattern as a nice guy, you'll be so far on the other end of the spectrum that you need to kind of start practicing the opposite. And related to that, the other way that your conflict avoidance shows up is just not expressing your true desires or opinions, again, out of fear of upsetting someone, making them uncomfortable, or being rejected. Okay, you're so desperate to get that validation. This looks like hiding your true feelings or not sharing your personal opinions. And it can also look like withholding information which you believe is going to upset someone. All right. And if they were to be upset, that would be a reflection of you triggering your toxic shame. Okay. Now, this is a really pernicious one in relationships because it can lead to a lot of dishonesty and its worst case betrayal. And lastly, around avoiding confrontation, avoiding conflict, the more you do this, the more you just suppress your anger and aggression. Now, this is a big thing for nice guys, that they are so afraid of exposing those kind of worse aspects of themselves, those shadows, that they repress them, and then they come out actually in these rage attacks. So it's like a pressure cooker, or you just bottle things up and there's so much pressure in there, and eventually the lid pops off and a nice guy will go into an unexpected rage attack, all because they haven't learned to channel their aggression in healthy ways, i.e. upholding boundaries, or having being able to have an uncomfortable conversation and stay grounded in it, or just assert their will, their desires in certain situations. So if you feel that you are suppressing your anger, this is a very common sign that you are a people pleaser. Okay, this final part, I want to talk about relationships and how people pleasing or the nice guy syndrome is affecting your relationship. Big one for guys is pedestaling women, that is seeing them as being more worthy than you, all right? Or when you get friend zoned, you stay there and you stay trying to get their attention, trying to, be present with them, go on kind of friend dates with them without seeing that actually you're wasting that time and you're kind of simping out, and you're not actually getting anything in return, all because you don't have that confidence or that self-worth to say like, hey, I'm an equal with this woman. I don't need to be treated like that. Another big one for nice guys in relationships is resentment towards your partner. And again, in worst cases, leading to that rage attacks I just spoke of. And this is because you aren't confronting your resistance to speaking up for your needs, asking for what you want, or upholding boundaries. Therefore, in a relationship, you constantly feel it's all about them. You're on the back foot, all because you don't have the capacity to advocate for yourself, all right? And this is related to that toxic shame where you don't feel worthy enough to even have your needs met, or that, your desires are valid. Anyway, so you go about living life on the back foot, builds up in resentment, and this plays out as passive aggressive behavior. Now, this is going to require some serious self-reflection to see, hey, where are those moments where I am acting out in passive aggression? All right, it's a really toxic behavior pattern with nice guys, and it can lead to so much toxicity. And trust me, if you don't sort that out, that will lead to the end of a relationship. Another really common one for nice guys is covert contracts. This is basically where you are doing things in the relationship with the expectation, the unwritten, the unspoken expectation that your partner will do something for you in return. Quite often this resolves around intimacy or sex, i.e., hey, I'm going to do the dishes and do all the housework, the whole time this week. So at the weekend, well, then she's going to have to sleep with me. Crude example, but this is a kind of covert contract where you're setting up an agreement in your head with this person without actually speaking to them. Okay. And then you get resentful and angry, passive aggressive when that contract, which you've created without them knowing about isn't fulfilled. And lastly, you display telltale signs of codependency. This is particularly feeling responsible for your partner's feelings or feeling the need to rush in and try and fix all of their problems. Codependency also looks like needing them to validate you, validate your self-worth the whole time. Codependency is also a severe lack of boundaries where you end up tolerating the intolerable, i.e. physical or verbal or emotional abuse. And that's just going to suck the life out of you if you don't learn to put your foot down and not tolerate the intolerable. All right, so in this video, I've covered 4 different ways that the nice guy syndrome is showing up in your life. And I've given you roughly 4 examples for each. So you're going to have a big map to reflect on your behavior patterns. Now, if you want to know how to stop, I suggest checking out my other videos on that. And if you want to learn about where all of this is coming from, I've got other videos on my channel. All right, thanks for watching. I hope you found the video valuable. If you're new to the channel, please hit subscribe, hit the like button and that little bell notification button as well. Apparently that helps the algorithm things, which could be handy for me to grow the channel and just keep feeding you more useful content like this.